Ladies and gentlemen, let's imagine if you are a teenager and you suddenly have a empowerment by your school, your society, and the public policy to be resilient. You, of course, as a teenager, you didn't know what it is. You want to ask your parents, but you are too shy, or you would predict their answers as dismissing, like it's an adult thing you wouldn't understand, or you want to ask your friends, but you are afraid they would laugh it off, they would joke it off. And that's exactly what are we going to talk about in the motion. This house regrets the glorification of resilience. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this motion is not about resilience. What we are going to discuss in this motion is not about resilience, it's about their capacity. It's about capacity, it's about what it takes to be resilient. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's us jump to our point of definition. Judging by the motion, glorification, and resilience, we would like to define glorification as a process of boasting or boosting either movements, view, or anything, such as it could mean anything, such as sports teams, schools, etc. And as the motion stands, the glorification we mean is the glorification to turn to resilience, and how the glorification is done, we would like to refer it is through social media, through various sectors as such, education and public policy and society and community. Now, what is resilience, ladies and gentlemen? Resilience is a mental capacity of individuals to endure hardships, adapt to various conditions, and recover from difficult times. We refer it to mental resilience. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we jump any further to our points of argumentation, we would like to limit this debate. We would like to limit this discussion to by what we mean to the target audiences of the glorifications is teenagers. Teenagers is young adults where they are emotionally unstable as a result of their social activities, such as various types of friends they have, their media or social media consumption, and the type of life they have in general, such as junior or senior high schools, friends groups, and etc. Now, how would we ban the glorification here? How would we regret the glorification here? I'm sorry. How would we regret the glorification? We would regret the glorification by education, workplace, and public policy. It would only be reduced. We regret the glorification of resilience by only reducing the amount of media in social media supporting resilience, so that it's not as frequently shown as previously done in the glorifying acts. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us jump to our points of argumentation. Now, firstly, of course, not everyone have the mental capacity to be resilient, ladies and gentlemen. Picture this. We have a group of teenagers. Let's say 10. Of course, not every teenager, not every 10 of them teenagers have the mental capacity to endure to be resilient and the emotional support from parents, close relatives, and friends. Not every teenagers have the exact emotional support we're talking about previously. And also, not every teenager is taught by informal lessons from their parents to be resilient. Not every teenagers have that many amount of friends. And even if they do, not every friend they have is willing to support them, to empower their resilience. Now, what would happen to teenagers if they are demanded to be resilient? As I've said before, not everyone have that mental capacity. Not everyone have that mental strength. Not everyone have that mental maturity. If they are demanded to be resilient, then we can expect a number of mental depression between teenagers. And by regretting, we can expect a number of mental depression between teenagers because, as I've said before, they not everyone have the mental capacity to be resilient, to endure hardships, to recover back from setbacks. And by regretting this, we hope to reduce a number of silent teenagers who act to be resilient when in truth they are delaying their depression. They are delaying their depression, as I said before. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's jump to our second argument, which is most of hardships teenagers face turns into trauma if they are not handled well emotionally. Of course, teenagers are first timers in facing adult problems, first timers in facing hardships, first timers in facing adult things such as buying fuel for their motorcycle and etc. And they don't always have mental capacity and informal mental education from family, which the family itself acts as the first primary environment, as the first or the primary environment for teenagers. Then, after that, it's friends and colleagues. But let's be honest, ladies and gentlemen, teenagers prefer hang out with friends. And let's note this, they or the friends that teenagers have don't always support don't always support those who face hardships and problems, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said before in my first argument. And when teenagers face hardships and told it to their friends, other teenagers are not always there for the ones who face hardships. They don't have the emotional maturity and the emotional capacity, ladies and gentlemen. Most of these types of teenagers didn't know what to do when their friends face hardships and tell it to them. Most of them would laugh it off and turn it to jokes, which is bad, ladies and gentlemen. If you face hardships, let's just picture if you face hardships and you tell your friend as a teenager, hoping to receive feedback from your friends, but you got your problem dismissed as jokes, dismissed as laughs, what do? You close yourself from social lives. And that's what teenagers do, ladies and gentlemen. As I've said before, they are first timers. Of course, they don't know what they are doing. And when they tell to another type of teenagers, to their friends, they don't know what they're doing, they would turn it off to jokes. And as a result, most of teenagers close themselves from their social life. Such example is in Indonesia. Not all teenagers have the quality of an adult's emotional capacity. Not all teenagers have that maturity. This turns to trauma, ladies and gentlemen, as I've said earlier, such as trauma opening up, trauma from social life, and trauma to their friends. Ladies and gentlemen, and by the reasons or the arguments of how not everyone have the mental capacity to be resilient, and our second argument, which most of hardships teenagers face, turns into trauma if not handled well emotionally by telling them to their not mature emotionally friends, we, as the proposition team, would still believe that this house regrets the glorification of resilience. Thank you, and by this, we propose this motion.